An era is coming to an end. After 1987, the F-8 Crusader will no longer be a part of the active inventory of the Navy and Marine Corps. The plane they call the MiG Master is retiring after a career that is perhaps without parallel. The first shipboard supersonic day fighter is fading into history. And here's the story of how it all began. In the summer of 1952, the U.S. Navy issued an invitation to bid on the design and construction of a new fighter to be operational with the fleet in 1956. LTV, then known as Chance Vought aircraft, entered the competition and won. The concept was actually quite simple. Design the smallest and lightest possible airframe around the most powerful engine available. That engine turned out to be the Pratt & Whitney J57 with 16,000 pounds of thrust. The XF-8U-1 began to take shape by late 1953. It emerged as a sleek and functional design that was years ahead of its time on many counts. For the first time, titanium and magnesium were extensively used, and the so-called Coke bottle fuselage was perfected in wind tunnel tests to reduce supersonic drag. For flight test, the airplane was disassembled for shipment to Edwards Air Force Base. It was towed to the loading area and placed on a C-124 transport. Soon it would take part in one of the most impressive initial flights in aviation history. A few days after it had left the factory, the airplane was in the final phase of reassembly. Among the systems being tested was the variable incidence wing. In the high position, the pilot was provided with excellent forward vision for carrier landings and a desirable angle of attack. The system worked well. Finally, late in the afternoon of March 24th, Chief Test Pilot John Conrad took the Crusader on its first taxi tests. With those tests completed, the 22 months of preparation were on the brink of culmination. Here now, the first flight of the XF-8U-1.
The date was March 25th, 1955, 1 week ahead of schedule. With Test Pilot Conrad again at the controls, preparation was made for the first flight of the XF-8U-1. On the ground, all performance data on the first and subsequent flights was recorded through a telemetering link. The information was carefully correlated for subsequent evaluation and study.
The Crusader had done it, exceeded Mach 1 on its first flight, and the milestones were only beginning. In 1956, a production F-8 set the first national speed record in excess of 1,000 miles per hour. Piloted by Commander Duke Windsor, this flight won the Navy its first Thompson Trophy. In 1957, the F-8 made 2 record-breaking transcontinental flights. One was an ocean-to-ocean flight made by Captain Bob Dosay and Lieutenant Commander Paul Miller from a carrier in the Pacific to one in the Atlantic in less than 3.5 hours. And then, Marine Corps Major John Glenn made the first supersonic crossing from LA to New York in 202 minutes. Finally, with the fleet, the Crusader set a milestone by joining operational squadrons within 2 years of its first flight. These days, it is often forgotten the F-8 gave rise to a second-generation aircraft called the Crusader III, bigger, faster, and meant to serve in the fleet interceptor role. Here is some rare footage of that airplane's first flight.
Clear to taxi to the east side of the lake bed. Line up with runway 25. Surface winds 260 at 15. Edwards altimeter 2994, over. This is Willie, roger up. Kingston Chase, this is Flight Willie, ready for takeoff. We'll release brakes on your signal, over. Kingston Chase to Flight Willie, roger. Turning into position, stand by for brake release. Okay, John, go. Here we go.
But the future did not hold the same promise for the Crusader III. It was competing against an airplane called the F-4 Phantom, and history records which aircraft won that competition. In the end, only 5 Crusader IIIs were built, and only 2 of those ever flew. Eventually, they were all scrapped, and perhaps only a few parts remain.
This is Edwards Tower, roger 340, clear to land on the lake bed at pilot's discretion. Winds 270 at 8 knots, altimeter 2994, over.
Despite the problems of its brother, the Crusader has seen a glorious career. In all, more than 5,000 naval aviators have flown the airplane. It earned the title MiG Master after shooting down 19 MiGs in exchange for only having 3 of its own shot down in air-to-air combat. And that is the best exchange rate of the Vietnam War. Today, this is the future of single-seat naval aviation. Multi-mission aircraft like the F-8. And while few will dispute the Hornet's ability, many an old Navy jock will still think back to the early days of single-seat airplanes that were designed to fight other airplanes pure and simple. And they insist when you're out of F-8s, you're out of fighters.